Hey, I'm well. How about you?
Doing great, doing great. Let's just jump right into it, man. You got a new album out. It's called Resistor. And I mean, yeah, right off the bat, I mean, you released this in a really interesting way. I've never seen anybody do this before. Tell us a little about that. Like, what did you do, and why did you do it, and what's up?
Well, I released a seven-song kind of heavy cyber music EP called Resistor, and I've noticed that there's a lot of kind of noise when it comes to releasing music these days. Everybody, does Bandcamp Friday. Everybody does whatever, and it's just people just trying to fight against the system to try to get their, to try to get their art seen by people. Some people, rely on it to eat, and
Yeah,
it's next to impossible to get your signal heard over the noise unless you do something, a little different than just throwing it out there on a streaming platform. And so I was thinking about uh, a way around the idea of the gatekeeper. Right? There's so many different gatekeepers. There's the cost of putting out an album is a gate you have to get through,
yeah, yeah.
and the production itself can be a thing. Once you get past all that, you've got music, you've got art. But then how do you get it in front of people? I mean, for me personally, the the act of the creation of the art is kind of like personal therapy. Like I'm going to do that whether or not anybody hears it. But if there's a
Totally.
chance, if there's a chance I can get that sound that helped me out there and it helps one other person, that's a bonus.
Yeah,
I think so.
yeah.
I'm gonna I'm gonna keep putting it out there. And if it helps anybody, you know, I'm gonna keep doing it. So I thought about this idea of gatekeeping, and one concept of that is, um, if you look at sort of um, corporations and governments that have all of this power to kind of silence and control what gets through the gate, whether it's art or whether it's political protest or whether it's just human rights. There are so many ways that silence falls on the message that people are trying to get out there. And so I wanted to show that there is a way to get through that using technology that can also be used to get other messages out. So uh, I kind of work in a cybersecurity adjacent field
Oh,
for my day job. So I decided I would use uh, a small Raspberry Pi computer. If you're not familiar with that, it's a very small single board computer. They're about this big. They run on about 5 volts of power.
mm,
Um, you can set it up to run without a monitor using some complicated scripting, some things, and have it kind of just power up and do something. Some people use it to serve media to their home TV. Some people use it to play video games. In this case, I'm using an operating system that is based on Linux. It's called Tails. It's an amnesiac Linux distribution. It's designed for security. I'm using it sort of in a creative manner here, but basically, if you were trying to remain anonymous in on the internet at this point, it's very
mm,
difficult. Everybody's trying to track you. This is
yeah.
designed even so far as if you're using it and someone kicks in the door to capture you, if you pull the power from it, it erases itself. It's completely blank.
Oh, wow.
So it's great for people in uh, areas of conflict, places with very oppressive governments that are censoring things. It's kind of designed to get that message out around things. The gray area of legality depends on where you're at. There are places where this method is absolutely illegal. Um, I'm fortunate enough to be in the states where I live right now. It's not illegal to do this.
Okay.
Um, so I'm able to get it out. Doing this, depending on where you're at, could be incredibly illegal.
Really? Okay.
And so I designed this device to start itself up, move everything into place, install everything it needs to. Um, it'll connect to a public Wi-Fi service somewhere out in the wild, and then once it's connected there, it will then connect to a virtual private network, which will randomly choose a location somewhere else in the world.
Hmm.
And that service is anonymous in itself, in that it there's no personal information attached to the account, so it's hard for it to come back to the individual specifically running the VPN. And then that service does not keep logs of the traffic. So once it leaves their exit node, there's no IP address that links back to the device.
Wow.
And so once that happens, once it's connected somewhere in the world, I don't actually know where it looks like it's coming from at this point. There was a timer, and after about 5 minutes to get all that settled, if it had a connection, it would then move the files into place and start to seed the files on the peer-to-peer client BitTorrent. Now, again, there's another gray area. It's completely legal because I'm providing that to you, and being the artist and copyright holder.
Yeah, it's your art. Yep.
It's not gonna, it's not gonna get you in trouble for that. There are many large corporations since the Digital Copyright Millennium Act or whatever that have automatic scanners for that stuff. So like as soon as you share a copy of one of their pieces of media, like within seconds, you're going to get a notice from your internet service provider that they know about it. So it in itself is like a kind of a dangerous place, depending on what you're doing.
So you have this device out there in the world. It's seeding your album. Your album is on there. It's seeding it out there, and so people in the area can see it, or it's like people on I'm not quite sure how that works, or like people on BitTorrent anywhere in the world can get it. How does that work?
So the cleverness, the reason that particular peer-to-peer client is good, and just for like a quick background, peer-to-peer client, you've probably heard of like Napster and LimeWire and Kazan, all those older ones, where the files are actually stored instead of on a server out on the internet, it's stored on the local machines of the people connected to it. But with BitTorrent, it chops it up into chunks of data, just small packets of data, and then it comes in pieces. So like you may have 75% of the pieces of the Resistor album, and two other computers have the missing 30% that would fit into the slots you need, so that it would make a complete album. And then once you've got a complete copy, then you're seeding it, and you're going to push out a full copy available to everybody else. So you bring it down in chunks and reassemble it, and then share it, and people can take it in chunks. But it makes it distributed so that if one of the nodes that's serving it gets cut out, as long as there's another seeder, the entire thing still exists.
Okay.
If no one is seeding a full copy of it, no one will be able to download a full copy of it.
I got you.
Everyone will get to whatever percentage is available. It kind of like fills the bucket. So as long as someone was willing to find the initial copy and keep sharing it long enough for someone else to get it and someone else to get it, the more people that seed it, the more available it is, and the longer it will live. And I haven't been able to check in a couple of days. It's still alive out there. It's still sending a heartbeat home. I don't know. I don't know how many people are sharing it right now, but last I've heard, we've got over 20.
Cool. Nice.
So I'm sure there's more than that now, but that's enough to keep it alive. So even if the device is found at this point, it's still, I think the project was a success.
Yeah, you made it. You made it through. That's awesome. Well, and also, I mean, it is on Bandcamp. You can stream it if people want to hear the album and they don't know how to do all that stuff. You can go to Bandcamp and listen to it.
Correct. Yeah. And I intend to. Right now, the price on Bandcamp is $500.
I noticed that. Yeah.
As using finance to keep someone from accessing the art. And I mean, you could take that as a statement on the art industry as well. Whether or not you like the art, it may cost an insane amount of money, because maybe someone will pay for it. If you'd like to pay that much for it, I'm happy to receive that. But once the device is found, I'm going to put it to something reasonable, and people can just enjoy.
I think that's really cool, though, man. You flipped it. You flipped the whole model on its head. That's pretty cool. Um, so yeah, let's talk a little bit about the music itself. I mean, would you say that this is a concept album in the sense of like of the actual music as well?
Yeah, somewhat. I really enjoy doing concept albums.
Yeah,
My first record, Magma Squid 3D, was a concept record. I used a purposely limited sound set of vintage video game sound sets and made a video game soundtrack for a game that doesn't exist, that has a time travel element that takes you from like the 1980s era to like the 1990s era of music and of video games, and it kind of blends between the two. There's some industrial, there's some chip tune. It's kind of like but it's a concept album. There's an arcing story and there's characters, um, and then I like to do that big detailed work that has some sort of feeling or story that goes over the whole thing. In between those, I kind of need a palette cleanser, right? Like I'll need a sketchbook, to find sounds, to get different ideas to put into the big albums. And then sometimes those things kind of take on a life of their own.
yeah,
And that's where the EPs come in between the big records. Is uh, It's a way for me to kind of release some art that I've made that may have started as an exercise in crafting a particular sound or a particular production technique that I've never tried before, or even just an experimentation. I try to um, polish it up and make it a thing, and then I can release groups of those as themed EPs.
cool. So it sounds like when you go to create music and you sit down to make a new song, do you go into it completely different each time, or do you have like kind of a system that you use for getting started, or how
So
does that work?
yeah, I do have a system, and I found for me that having some limit to the equipment that I have actually helps me. So
Yeah,
I've got some hardware synthesizers here, right? Like I've got this like Behringer Crave, I've got
nice,
Korg Wave State, I've got some boutique effects, outboard effects. There's a Create Audio East Beast here. Um,
nice.
and then I've got a sampling turntable in case I want to rip something off a bunch of vintage records that I have, even if it's just, needle noise. Like just I've done needle drops on stuff where it sounds like
Hmm.
it's just because it sounds like a needle drop. Just
Yeah,
things, found sounds, things like that. And it all kind of starts as an experimentation. Um, it's just like if you sit down at a blank piece of paper and you want to just grab a something that's nearby and just start writing. That's kind of how they all start. But what I did find that in order to get my brain from that idea, get that sound out of my head, I need to have some sort of system that like gets you started. So
yeah.
I spent some time building templates in my workstation, so that when I open it, I've got three or four templated like bus routings and basic instruments, basic synth bass that I use all the time, like my standard instruments for different things. So there's like an ambient one if I'm doing big like droning soundscapes, and there's like a totally blank one that's just set up to like push sound around so that I could go into it completely like 100% experimental and just make noises. But getting that template set up in advance leads to a better output, because then I don't have to keep routing things and have it all be kind of disconnected. It helps me keep the sound so that
Yeah,
it fits I don't want to say the brand because it's not really a brand, but like fits the concept of this project, so that it all kind of fits. That if you listen to it, you'll be like, oh yeah, that's that one. I know that guy.
yeah. No, I like that idea of having like a palette setup because I know a lot of times if you have like a bunch of stuff that you got to connect each time, it can be discouraging to even sit down because you're like, "Oh, I don't want to plug in all my shit and deal with all, you know what I mean?"
Yep. Yeah, and I mean, you use a Moog, right? So you know that once you get that thing patched, like that's the sound it has.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
like I had this thing patched to run a particular bass sound for like a month, and then I dusted my synthesizer with a brush,
Oh,
and it completely, it was gone. It was completely gone.
yeah, yeah,
Um, Even though I have notes, I'm gonna have to try to figure out if I can bring that sound back. But that's kind of the fun, though. I mean, it's you never
yeah.
have the same thing.
That's
It's
yeah. That's kind of the way I like to work sometimes. Where no, I actually have the Moog with like a whole like little modular setup right now. So Yeah, I mean, right now there's nothing plugged in, so a lot of times I will sit down, do a fresh patch, and then when it's done, I'll unpatch it, and that's it. You know what I mean? It's whatever I was able to capture, and that's the moment. You know?
Yeah, and I think that's great. I tend to I tend to work the workflow into like a system too, where I name my project files like some random name, and then it'll be like dash sketch, and that sketch is just finding the sound. There's not
Mm-hmm.
really a real musical structure. There's maybe like 3 4 sections of like finding what's the general feeling of this piece. And then take two would be putting that into some sort of logical structure. I'm not really set on traditional like Western song structures all the time. I do tend to kind of explore rhythm and
Mm-hmm.
structure a little bit more than like a freeform ambient is probably not uh, always what I do, but it's something in between.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that process of naming the files is always kind of like there's a sketch, there's take two, there's take three, which is where I ruin take two, and then there's take four, which is almost always like by the take four version of that, like the song is alive. It's what it's going to be, and then everything after that is just fine tuning until finally I have to just throw it out there because I can't. I'll ruin it again if I keep messing with it.
Sure. Yeah. So, how long is that process for you of like starting a song and like just diving in and working on it for a while, and before you feel like it's where it
it
needs to be?
yeah, it depends. It really depends. So there are on my YouTube channel, I tend to do these like I usually call them like sketches because they usually are one take what it is. Like
Yeah.
I'll spend a little time. I work out of the studio for my day job too. So like I'll
Oh,
do
cool.
my day job work and then it'll be lunchtime. And I'll grab some food and then I'll just turn around and I'll be making music. That's kind of what my daily um,
That's
work.
awesome.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate to be able to work remotely, and I have been for
Yeah.
years. So I can literally just be in my studio and I can switch from work mode to music creation, and it actually helps because when I return back to work mode, my thoughts are clear. It helps me organize all that kind of stress and noise, and I feel like it's
I,
beneficial.
I bet. Yeah. I mean, those are like two totally different sections of your brain that you're, you know,
Yeah, and
working on.
I feel like many other, I guess, people that make music feel is sometimes I can't think straight because I've got an idea in my head that's too loud.
Mm.
Um, and I need to get that idea out by making making the music in the studio sometimes.
Yeah.
I've had times where I can't sleep because I was like, oh, I wonder if I could do this. I wonder if I can make this weird sound.
You know, I had another question that I was going to ask, but I think you just answered it. I was going to ask, how you're able to, because you're someone who has a pretty high output of stuff that you've been putting out consistently. So I was going to ask how you do that, how you're able to finish so much stuff.
It's I have to say it's honestly the templates I mentioned earlier. Not
Mm,
having to spending the time. I'm gonna totally screw up this quote. There was somebody, like a president or something, maybe
mm,
Abraham Lincoln, said that if he has to chop down, he has an hour to chop down a tree. He's going to spend the first like 45 minutes
yeah,
sharpening the axe.
yeah,
Yeah, that is true here too. I took the time uh, several years ago to build a workspace inside the workspace that works with a good flow. And
yeah,
that flow takes the time from idea to reality, makes it much smaller. And so you can generate you could generate a pretty formed musical idea in, 3 or 4 lunch breaks. And
yeah, yeah,
and then it's very important to just leave it alone. I've got hard drives full of ideas that I just had
yeah,
to leave alone because
yeah,
you can't see it as its proper structure the first time sometimes. And you definitely your ears get tired and
mm-hmm,
you start to lose some of the details and then end up making it worse. That's why like
yeah,
that take three period is like when you go, ugh, I made it worse, and then you got to walk away from it.
yeah, yeah. You gotta kind of keep it fresh. I feel it's a fine balance a lot of times. Yeah. Interesting. Well, so if I mean, just to kind of expand on that a little bit, would you have any advice for someone setting up their studio for the first time, or in the early stages of trying to figure out their own setup?
Definitely. Keep it simple. Don't uh, don't get stuck in gear acquisition syndrome. I know
Mm-hmm.
so many people that
Yep.
have these like paralyzed workflows because they've got the coolest toys and never really had the because there were so many, they never really had the time to get deep into one of them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, for me personally, people that have seen my YouTube channel, I'm a big fan of the Korg Wave State. It's a modern wavetable synth, but it has like the ability to be very, very complex and very, very deep, which is something I like in my music. But it takes up the space of one keyboard. It's
Mm-hmm.
also MIDI, so I can map it to control all my other synthesizers, even the software synthesizers.
Mm-hmm.
It has the ability to load my own waveforms into it. So if I take a sampler out and I record a bird squawking in my backyard, I can then bring it in and put it into the synth and mangle it. Um, it's efficient for me because it does many things in the space of one thing instead of being a unitasker like the Crave, which can only be one patch at a time, and then you can kind of fiddle within that patch. It's great, but this can only do one thing. So I would say that
Mm-hmm.
if you're starting out, um, don't worry about a room full of hardware synthesizers. Get yourself a small MIDI keyboard,
Yep.
uh, and there are loads of really great free software synthesizers out there. Go learn them. Like
Yeah.
your workstation probably comes with some of the best synthesizers on the market, and that's why they're
Yeah.
in there. You know, those
Yeah.
companies, Apple bought great synthesizers and put them into Logic. So Logic's got a lot of power. You don't have to worry about spending a ton of money. You could do it. You could start recording music with a laptop, um, and that's it. You don't
Yeah.
even like you don't even need. You can make the keys on the keyboard a piano
Yep.
if you need to.
Yeah, yeah. And I know in Logic you can do musical typing, and then a little keyboard comes up, and you can use the keyboard
Yep.
as the piano. Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't even need a computer. You can do, you can do. There's various devices you could use to record. Yeah, I mean, honestly, just make it. Just do it. Go make your art. Go explore. Have fun. Put it out there. If it doesn't, if you don't like it, it's okay. The next one you put out will be better. And
Great advice.
as long as you keep doing that, yeah,
Yeah.
it's fun.
Yeah, and this has been a recurring theme on this podcast so far, where we've been talking about music, we've been talking about film, we've been talking about art. Use what you got, get out there and get started. If there's things that you need, you'll figure it out down the line as you learn more, but you're gonna learn by doing so much more than, you know, just being
Yeah,
up here all the time trying to figure out what you need next. It's like just get started. There's people out there online on Reddit you can ask for help, and you can learn
yeah.
a lot. Yeah.
I'll say that too about find a community, find like a local
Hmm.
synthesizer club, or if you're into guitar, like go jam. There's jam sessions. Go to an open mic. Just play it. You know what? If you're if you feel like it was bad, take
Yeah.
note of what you didn't like about it. I've had people come to me and say, "Why don't I don't like my sound?" And I think it sounds fine. They're like, "I just
Right.
don't like it." Well, what don't you like about that? Oh, I don't like how, I don't know, it makes my ears tired when I listen to it. Well, then go
Mm,
watch a YouTube video about what that is. Like, why does that happen? And then, oh, I know how to filter that out. And now my whole palette of sounds has improved across the board because I learned a thing. Um,
yeah.
I don't think people should get as discouraged. It's not going to happen fast. You can't learn to draw a photorealistic drawing the first time you pick up a pencil. You got to do it a lot of times.
Yeah.
Um, it's the same, just a different artistic tool.
Yeah. And I mean, I think if you're just learning too, there's people, I mean, if you're not an audio engineer and you're a musician, maybe you want to hire an audio engineer when you get to that point.
Absolutely. That's another good point too. Is like you don't have to. Um, you shouldn't have to feel like you have to do everything by yourself.
Yeah.
I when it comes to the idea of production, that's part of my process. Is
Yeah.
I've always had an interest in um, multimedia art, whether it's film or photography or you know, 3D modeling or printing or whatever, you know, any of that stuff, all the way up to audio engineering. Since I was young, I've always been into music and audio. So it takes a long time to craft that ear. Some people have an ear that can pick out a song as multiple streams of sound. So like you can just hear a piece of music and you can pick out the violins, you can pick out the cellos, you can pick out the you know, the whole woodwind section or one individual instrument. Some people just have that naturally, and some people cannot do that.
Yeah.
Um, and maybe I don't know, maybe that's something you can learn. But it's definitely something that if you have it, you can make it better. Um, but if you don't have that, even if you don't have that yet, go find someone who does and ask them. Maybe they're not a
Totally.
professional, but maybe it's a peer who's also in your local music scene that you can trust to say, look, I need you to not be like, oh, it's great. I need you to tell me, like, honestly, does this really suck? And
Yeah, man.
it really helps.
I think we all, regardless of where we are, like in our careers or whatever, I mean, we all have people that we share stuff with and get people like you and I have done that. We've sent each other
Yep.
songs, and you know,
Yep.
it's important to have that feedback and have that group. So definitely, yeah, find some other people that are making music and just share with them, and I mean, you'll grow so much from that. I think.
Yep. I I think that part of too that the thing that makes my output, going back to that, the thing that makes my output um a little higher, I think, from start to finish than some people, is because I've spent so much time like kind of almost obsessing over how to do things. Like I still do it. Like I was
Yeah,
listening to something this morning, I don't even remember what it was. It might have been Guns N' Roses on the radio,
nice.
and I was just like driving, and I noticed, I was like, oh dang, they went they kept this whole level here, and then
Mm.
when the guitar comes in, oh, it was Civil War, Guns N' Roses,
Mm-hmm.
and they got this like slow intro with like piano music and like clean guitar, and then out of nowhere, like kind of like up and to the right, this full wall of slash distorted guitar. It came out of nowhere, but like
Yeah,
it was so specifically placed, um, that like it inspired me to do something on a track that I was working on before we started this call this morning, psychoacoustically, that I hadn't thought about doing before I heard that. And that was, how long ago was that? 40 years ago? So
yeah.
like
At least
you can find crazy inspiration from people that have done this before, and then push it a little bit further for what you're doing.
that's another good point is just like listening to music and analyzing and really just listening. I mean, that's another way to really learn your craft.
Yeah, some people say, I've heard people say that like such and such ruined music for them. Like, oh, learning about blah blah ruined music for me. I'm the
Hmm.
other way around. Like, the more I can learn
Yeah,
about it, like I love reading about, like, you know, Hans Zimmer has these gigantic drums in his productions. Like, how in the world did he make those gigantic drums? Well, number one, he's like one of the foremost film composers in the world, and he can call the best drummer in the universe and have special drums made and
yeah,
special microphones that have never existed before to record
yeah,
these big drums.
yeah,
Well, I'm going to go try to do it with a stock plug-in in Logic and like a whole bunch of reverb and see if I can get it there. Like,
yeah,
that's I love that. I love that idea of just like looking at a piece of art and then trying to figure out, okay, can I do that? Can I do that in my way
yeah,
with what I have available?
yeah. I love that. Oh yeah. Well, I'm gonna change things up real quick, and we're gonna do a little segment I like to call.
Questions from the internet.
My people.
Yeah, so these are actual questions that were submitted online. Might be kind of random, but let's go through them and see what they are asking.
I'll do my best.
Are there any themes or messages you try to convey through your music?
Yes. Um, Almost always, my music comes from my need to process the amount of stress, anxiety, and dread that we feel pumped into our brains all day long, every day. So
Mm.
my art tends to take a dystopian end of the world kind of stance. I have a soundtrack for the end of the world as the tagline on most of my social pages. I I feel like it helps me process those feelings by bringing that feeling out that's in here. I bring it out in the music. So there's a lot of I often do a lot of themes about technology that's out of control, surveillance, uh, you know, overpowered authority figures, unchecked power, and general environmental dread is kind of like the main thing, and that's the things I'm feeling and the things I'm seeing, and I'm just kind of getting it out of my brain by making it into a sketch.
Mm. Cool. Uh, what are you listening to right now?
Oh, so I've been listening to a lot of 70s rock. Um,
Nice.
like I just recently listened to Dreamboat Annie from Heart because the guitar work is so phenomenal in that record. I keep going back to that production era because they did not have the crazy technology that we have right now, but it just sounded so clean and so good. I listened to a lot of David Bowie as well. Um, when it comes to more synthesizer stuff, I still listen to Nine Inch Nails
Love Nine Inch Nails.
a lot. My preferred era is kind of like Halo 8, like Downward Spiral and adjacent albums. Like that's
Okay.
my probably because of my formative Nine Inch Nails years were in that. But that's my favorite of his work. Plus the soundtrack, the work that Resnor's doing is
Yeah.
phenomenal. Let me think. Who else? Um, I'm very influenced by some of the older Berlin school synth artists like Tangerine Dream and Kraftwerk, Vangelis when it's coming to like doing that kind of grand cinematic sound. I like to kind of draw upon those guys. And uh, yeah, and I also listen to a lot of really technical metal. I like
Nice.
love like overly technical heavy metal. The problem is I think that's actually what ruined my ability to play guitar is because I got
Mm.
too focused on trying to figure out how these amazing like technical guitar pioneers are doing right now. Um, I got too focused on playing that, and then it kind of like it hurt the way that I was playing. So I have to back away from that from time to time. I just get too I love
I,
it's the technicality is so great, but like I have to back
I,
away
d-
from that.
I do know what you mean. Like when it comes to maybe like songwriting, maybe you're overthinking it a little too much.
Yes.
You're trying to make it more complicated, but you're kind of taking away from the soul of just like the freedom of letting it happen,
Yep.
you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you can really feel that in that I've been a guitar player for most of my life. And I played in loads of working bands in my, in college and whatnot. And the the many concerts I've gone to, you don't um it's harder to remember the really complicated technical stuff
Yeah.
compared to the stuff that's emotionally driven. So, like, you may hear the most insane technical thing, but you're going to forget it sooner. But if you hear something that you can, like, kind of hum in your head, that's going to stay there.
Hmm.
So, while I do tend to get overly technical with some of my rhythms and things, I always try to remember to put something in there to, like, help people stay there. Otherwise,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
too much.
To bring it back. Yeah. Just curious. So was guitar your first like primary instrument, or did you learn keyboard first, or?
My first instrument was actually I wanted to learn drums. My brother is a musician. My sister's a musician. They always had musical instruments. My brother's has a master's degree in classical pipe organ, and my sister's was a professor of music for a while. She plays piano and flute and plays in a big band, like 1940s music. They're they're the real musicians in the family. I'm just kind of the guy that was like, well, you guys can play everything else. I'm going to learn how to play guitar. I'm going to learn how to play drums. And so I went to school, and they gave me just a snare drum, like to play like in the marching band, and
Right, yeah.
not my thing.
Mm,
And so I quickly kind of learned the basic idea of musical rhythm with one drum, and then decided I wanted to learn guitar. So I switched over to guitar, and then I just became. I played hours and hours a day. That's what I did, play guitar.
yeah.
But having that foundation in drums, I think, helped.
It's funny though. The reason I asked was I feel like I've been seeing a lot of guitar players that have moved into more like modular synth stuff. And I don't know, maybe that's because like as guitar players, we get really into like pedals and stuff like that, and like making sounds. And then when you find like synthesizers, you're like, oh, I can make any sound, you know?
Yeah, I think that's it. I actually, I hate to bring back Zimmer again, but uh, in his masterclass, that like website that does people that have mastered their craft, and they do like a class for people who already know some stuff about that thing.
Mm,
So in the Hans Zimmer masterclass, he talks about how important it is to have a synthesizer um,
mm,
if you're making music, because you can literally craft anything out of it. Like with a guitar, you can tune it differently. You can
right,
put different pickups in it. You can put distortion on it or chorus on it, but it's still a guitar, and
right,
that's great. That's what it is. It should nothing can really sound like it. Even the fake guitars that people make, like the apps, they're close, but they're still not guitars. There's something
right,
about the dynamics of playing guitar. That's what it is. But like you can do so much. You can make an entire production with just one useful synthesizer. So yeah, it's like a force modifier to your production to be able to craft anything. And
yeah,
there's nothing against presets and samples. That's all valid too. Like if you want to be an entirely sample based musician, there are very successful entirely sample based musicians. That's do it if that's what you want to
totally.
do. But
Yeah,
like
totally.
for me, my process is kind of pulling it out of nothing when I can. Um,
Speaking of guitar though, have you ever tried any of the like MIDI guitar kind of stuff where you can map your guitar to a synth?
so I'd love to do that further. I have done that using kind of antique technology. I borrowed one of the old Roland MIDI pickups from the 90s.
Yep, I know what you're talking
Um,
about. Yeah.
and I did a little bit of experimenting with that when I was in a band. It was cool, but it was very primitive compared to that. And then I had
Totally.
this until recently. I had this little device called a Korg Pandora, which is like a small box that you can plug into. And I actually mounted it to this guitar right here, this one. I had it Velcro
Oh,
to it,
nice. Yeah.
and it had some sort of real time pitch detection and reprocessing ability, so you could make it sound like an organ, like a Leslie organ,
Yeah.
um, with playing the guitar. So like I've done that too, but it's not quite MIDI. It's something. So it's closer to the way Rocksmith works than it is um, a MIDI guitar. I'd love the chance to like jam on one of those cool light up LED sticks though someday. That'd be
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. I found something recently. I'm trying to remember what it was called, but there's a plugin now that it's just a plugin. You can put it on an audio track and then you get a MIDI track from it. Anyway, I'll try to figure out what that's called. If I find it, I'll shoot you a link.
Yeah, awesome.
And I'll put it in the description too if you guys are interested. So next question: how do you find and incorporate unique sounds into your music?
Oh, so one of the electronic bands that I really kind of came up realizing what you could do is Aphex Twin.
Mm,
Um, Aphex Twin is
yeah.
completely in a class of their own. Even now, they're just that guy's got he's in a different headspace than a lot of people. Um, but they use a lot of found sounds,
Mm,
like chair squeaks and like hitting a metal drum or like dropping a chain on a table. And that was always fascinating to me because it's still purely experimental electronic music. Even though there are analog sounds in it, they've become something different because of how much they've like how much has gone into it.
Yeah.
So I try to, again, I like concepts. I try to think of things. This last year for an album that is coming, uh, it's a space album. It's a space adventure, and there's a point where, as always, Earth is destroyed, and these people are leaving, and they're remembering, the water, they're remembering the ocean existing, which now it doesn't. And so to kind of get that melancholy, to try to get that thing, I actually took a field recorder to the Atlantic Ocean in North Carolina and recorded the sound of the waves in North Carolina. And then on a separate trip, I took the same field recorder to Bodega Bay, California, and recorded the Pacific crashing against the rocks there. And then at the beginning of the track, I have both Atlantic and Pacific oceans panned hard to either side, and then they slowly join to make one sound in the middle. And it's subtle, and no one's going to know that unless they see this see this described, that I traveled 6,000 miles, maybe 12, to just record the sound of water. But that's the amount of detail that inspires me to put into these things. Like that's part of the process. I feel like even if just for me, that adds a level of something special that helps me through the production process. And hopefully that adds weight to the art.
Yeah. Well, we kind of touched on this, but here's the question again. What advice would you give to aspiring underground electronic producers?
Oh, network. Absolutely. Go, go listen to Night Ride FM and join the Discord and talk to other producers and other fans. Go on Twitter and make friends with other producers. Learn as much as you can about. I'm not saying go copy somebody's homework, but go be inspired by what other people are doing, first and foremost, and then figure out what you want to do, and then just go do it. I think that's probably the best way to just getting started is the hardest part. I mean, I have insane imposter syndrome. Like I'll put out music and I can't believe anybody wants to listen to it but me. But by the time I release it, I've already listened to this record 400 million times in the process of creating it. And so once it goes out there, it's a little nerve-wracking, but it's really nice to see that people listen to it.
I think, it's also hard when you've listened to a song that many times. It's hard to imagine where somebody else's headspace is when they listen to it for the first time.
And I think it's fascinating to think the things that when I make a record, the things I put out that I go, I mean, I really like this. No. And there's this other thing that's like, well, this is good, but it's not my favorite thing. But that may be somebody else's favorite thing. Like that piece that that obviously I intended to put something there. But the thing I thought was going to be, this is going to be the thing people like, isn't. It's something else that other people latch onto. And I think that's great. I think it kind of shows that, as with any art, it's subjective. There are people that will like it, and there are people that won't like it. But the people that like it, they feel the feeling through it. And I think that's cool.
Oh yeah. That's a good question. Last one. How do you know when a piece is finished?
Oh, it's never finished. You might be done with it. You might be done with it, but they're never finished.
So you just get to a point where you're sick of it, and then that's it.
It's almost like there's a point where I feel like I'd like to do a road test, right? I have a nice sound system in my vehicle, and I trust it. Like I know that when I listen to really good quality recordings in there, they sound really good. So I can trust that. And so I often operate as much as I can on if it sounds good, it's probably good. I don't need it to sound perfect. I need it to not have things that I can pick out that I don't like. Once I get to that point, I think the track's about done, and then we'll go through I'll go through the mastering process again. Because I like to do the whole process. For me is doing the whole thing. I'll then put it away for a while, and then I'll come back to it with fresh ears, and I'll do the mastering session on it. Most of the time, you can get it to the mastering session, and you don't have to go back to the mix and do things. But sometimes you'll get there, and the actual process of cleaning it up, you'll find something overlapping or something that gets lost.
Yeah, I found that too, because the mastering can really bring out things too.
Yeah, it can both bring things alive and make things really annoying that you missed because your ears were tired when you were mixing it or something. It's less work if you get your mix as close as possible before you try to master it.
Totally, yeah.
But that takes a lot of, I'd say that takes a lot of practice. But it's part of the process. It's fun.
Yeah, man. Well, this has been amazing, dude. I think there's been some really good advice in there. I think this episode is really going to help some people with their journey of getting going.
I appreciate that. And also, I think one really big takeaway from you listening to me talk about the way I do this stuff is this is your cake to bake. Don't necessarily think that I know what I'm talking about.
Sure.
Question who's giving you advice, especially since everybody on YouTube has here's how you do a thing with music production. Watch them, take them all, but don't. The way I do things may be completely wrong, and there's likely much better engineers than me listening to this going, don't do that. That's the dumbest advice ever. I don't know. That's how I do it. Find your way.
Yeah, I mean, again, we've said on the show that there's no rules to releasing stuff or even making music, but I think you got to learn as much as you can, and if you know the rules, you can break them.
Yep, and it's all about practice, research, and growth. It's very rare for someone to have 100% natural music talent. Those people exist, and they get paid a lot of money. Don't let that discourage you. You don't necessarily even need to release your music if you just want to keep it to yourself and make it. I mean, I did that for a decade. I think just making the music is like therapy. It's good for you.
Yeah, another thing is I think you do it for yourself, and when you put a song out, when you think a song is done or done enough, and you put it out, it is to be put out there in the world, but I don't think you do it for other people. I think you do it for yourself.
Yeah, and I feel like that's where a lot of people get lost. Is when they lose sight of their own journey because somebody on a different journey had a success, and then they get hyper focused on what was it about this? Is it the sound? Is it this way they do this thing? Is it the structure? And by all means, take that and try it with your own sound and your own music. But people often get hyper focused on making it sound exactly like something else. It's got to be, if it sounds exactly like this, but it's different notes, it's going to work. I don't think it works that way. Otherwise, everything would be the same.
Mm-hmm.
Just go make noises. Have fun.
Right on. Well, once again, real quick, where's a great place people can find you online?
So the best place is badguysgetdead.com because I own that and I manage that. You can't really trust social media these days to do anything helpful. So I'm on most of the socials as well. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Mastodon. I'm not currently on Instagram at the time of this recording, but I'm trying to get that back. They banned me for community rules violation because I took too long to set up my account and they thought I was a bot. So I'm working to get that back. Stay tuned. But yeah, hit me up on the socials. The website's there. Bandcamp's also a good spot. badguysgetdead.bandcamp.com. Come say hi.
Oh yeah. Well, thanks again, man. I really appreciate it. And yeah, until next time, we'll see you guys later.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
See ya.
All right. Peace out, guys.